Dawn breaks over the English Channel, April 12, 1944. General Friedrich von Schreiber stands alone on the windswept cliffs of Pas-de-Calais, binoculars pressed against his weathered face, scanning the gray horizon for enemy vessels. The sea below churns with cold indifference, waves slamming against jagged rocks like muffled artillery fire. His aide has just handed him a leather-bound intelligence report. Its final page contains a single, dismissive sentence that will haunt him for the rest of his days. Allied armored assault directly onto fortified beaches remains tactically impossible and strategically suicidal. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Within 8 weeks, that certainty will shatter beneath the treads of swimming tanks emerging from the surf, rewriting every principle of amphibious warfare and sealing the fate of the Third Reich's Atlantic fortress. The spring of 1944 hung heavy over occupied Europe like a storm that refused to break. For 5 grinding years, the swastika had flown over the boulevards of Paris, the harbors of Amsterdam, the forests of Poland. The Reich stretched from the Pyrenees to the gates of Leningrad, from the icy fjords of Norway to the burning sands of North Africa. Yet now that empire was trembling. The balance of power had shifted with the slow, unstoppable momentum of a turning tide. In the east, Soviet divisions, millions strong, were pushing through Ukraine, reclaiming mile after bloody mile. In Italy, American and British forces clawed their way north through mountain passes and river valleys, their progress measured in corpses and broken towns. And yet, everyone, from the lowest infantry private in the trenches to the highest strategic planners in Berlin, understood one immutable truth. Without a direct assault on Western Europe, without a dagger thrust into the heart of Hitler's fortress Europe, the war could drag on for years, perhaps even decades. The German High Command knew the invasion was coming. Every map, every intercepted transmission, every movement of Allied shipping screamed the same warning. The question that consumed thousands of hours in smoke-filled briefing rooms from Berlin to Brussels was not if, but where and how. Colonel General Johannes Blaskowitz, commander of Army Group G in southern France, spent sleepless nights poring over coastal surveys. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, Supreme Commander West, personally toured every major port from Norway to Spain, peering through his pince-nez glasses at concrete bunkers and barbed-wire defenses. General Oberst Kurt von Tiedemann, chief of coastal fortifications, obsessed over firing angles and minefield density ratios. They all reached the same conclusion, one built on centuries of military doctrine and validated by every major amphibious operation in recorded history. The Allies would need a major port, preferably Calais, and they would certainly never attempt to land heavy armor directly onto a defended beach. This wasn't mere arrogance or blind faith. It was what they called military science, proven through centuries of blood and failure. The disastrous Gallipoli campaign of 1915 had demonstrated the suicidal nature of attacking fortified beaches. The failed Dieppe raid of 1942, where brave Canadian soldiers were slaughtered in broad daylight on the shingle, confirmed that modern machine guns and artillery made such assaults impossible.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. General von Schreiber himself had written a widely circulated tactical paper titled The Defender's Advantage in Coastal Warfare. His conclusions were stark and absolute. Artillery and machine guns positioned on high ground could annihilate any landing force before it reached the seawall. Tanks could not possibly be transported in the initial assault waves. They required port facilities, cranes, and secure harbors. Any commander attempting otherwise would be sending his men to certain death. By spring 1944, Hitler had poured the Reich's dwindling resources into making these theoretical advantages a reality of concrete and steel. The Atlantic Wall stretched 2,400 kilometers from Arctic Norway to the Spanish frontier. a megalithic construction project that dwarfed the ancient wonders of the world. 15,000 reinforced bunkers crowned every strategic hilltop. 500,000 beach obstacles, steel hedgehogs, wooden stakes, and concrete tetrahedra studded every potential landing site like an industrial nightmare garden. 6.5 million mines lay buried beneath sand and soil. The Tote organization, mobilizing 300,000 workers, consumed 1.2 million tons of concrete monthly, more than the entire American construction industry used in peacetime. Coastal villages were emptied, cliffs dynamited, and fields swallowed by trenches and tank traps. Hitler's speeches thundered of an impregnable wall that would hurl any invader back into the sea. Yet beneath all that hubris lay a fatal assumption. The strongest defenses were concentrated around ports. Calais, with its massive harbor and proximity to England, bristled with the newest guns and the strongest garrisons. Le Havre, Cherbourg, Dunkirk each received layers of fortifications that made them nearly impregnable. But between these fortress ports stretched hundreds of kilometers of less defended coastline. The beaches of Normandy, lying in this strategic no-man's land, received only secondary attention. Why waste resources fortifying beaches where, according to every known doctrine, no rational enemy would land? General Lieutenant Wilhelm Richter, commanding the 716th Infantry Division in the Normandy sector, saw the flaw. He repeatedly requested additional resources. The coastline here is vulnerable, he warned in reports to Army Group B headquarters. If the enemy possesses some method of landing armor in the initial waves, we lack the mobile reserves to contain a breakthrough. His warnings were noted and dismissed. Staff officers in Paris, educated in the rigid doctrines of the General Staff, explained patiently that tanks simply could not be landed on open beaches. Their reasoning seemed sound. A Churchill tank weighed 40 tons. A Sherman weighed 33. Such machines could not swim, could not be carried by small landing craft, could not maneuver on soft sand. The first armor would arrive only after infantry had secured a port, by which time German panzer divisions would have sealed off any bridgehead. German confidence was further reinforced by intelligence assessments that seemed impeccable. The Abwehr, their military intelligence service, had been the envy of Europe. Under Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, it had maintained networks across neutral and occupied territories alike. In early 1944, those networks generated thousands of reports about Allied preparations. Reconnaissance flights photographed troop concentrations in southern England. Radio intercepts logged surging communications traffic. Agents embedded in neutral countries sent dispatches about ship construction, fuel stockpiling, and the movement of divisions. Yet the very abundance of data became a curse. Every report could be interpreted multiple ways. British vehicles massing near Dover could mean an assault on Calais, or a clever deception. Increased radio chatter might signal imminent invasion, or merely training exercises. We were drowning in data, Oberst Heinrich Staubwasser, Chief Intelligence Officer of Army Group B, later wrote.
The Allies exploited this chaos through Operation Fortitude, a deception campaign of staggering sophistication. Its objective was simple: convince the Germans that the main invasion would strike at Pas-de-Calais, where geography and logic both pointed. In the fields of Kent and Sussex, a vast illusion unfolded. Hundreds of inflatable rubber tanks, painted with meticulous care, sat in perfect formation at dummy bases. From the air, they looked indistinguishable from real armor. Plywood Spitfires and fabric Mustangs filled mock airfields, while fake landing craft constructed from canvas crowded southeastern harbors. Even the smoke rising from campfires was artificially produced by hidden generators. The masterstroke, however, lay in radio deception. 300 skilled operators transmitted thousands of messages daily between fictitious units. 2nd Armored Division requesting fuel priority for Operation Quicksilver. 79th Infantry Regiment reports embarkation complete. Air Group Alpha standing by for coordination window Baker 3. German intercept stations meticulously logged and analyzed every message, unaware that they were tracking ghosts. And at the center of this phantom army stood General George S. Patton, America's most aggressive commander, a man the Germans respected and feared in equal measure. His conspicuous presence in Kent seemed to confirm everything. He toured dummy bases, delivered fiery speeches to imaginary troops, and appeared in just enough public places that German agents would report his location. When Berlin learned that Patton commanded the fictitious 1st U.S. Army Group, the conclusion was inescapable. The invasion would strike at Calais. The deception was reinforced by double agents, chief among them the Spaniard Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo. Through a network of completely fictional sub-agents, Garbo fed the Germans an elaborate tapestry of lies so consistent, so richly detailed, that Berlin regarded him as one of their most valuable informants. His fake reports described troop movements, training exercises, and supply shortages, every one designed to confirm Calais as the true invasion site. By late May 1944, German intelligence believed it possessed a perfect picture. 89 Allied divisions massed in southeastern England under Patton's command. The target was obvious. Calais was close, defensible, and the shortest route to the Ruhr industrial heartland. Normandy, by contrast, offered none of these advantages. Their conclusion wasn't foolish. It was logical. It was doctrine. It was also catastrophically wrong. For in secret British workshops, engineers were rewriting those very doctrines. Major General Percy Hobart's funnies, bizarre modified tanks, were being tested under armed guard. Shermans fitted with canvas screens could now swim. Churchills carried massive mortars capable of obliterating bunkers with one shot. Other variants flailed their way through minefields or spewed fire across 120 meters of sand. To German analysts, these reports sounded like madness. A tank that swam? A flamethrower that reached beyond artillery range? Nonsense. They dismissed them as Allied desperation or disinformation. Even more incredible was the Mulberry Project, 2 massive artificial harbors secretly built to support the invasion. The Allies would tow them across the channel, sink old ships to form breakwaters, and unload thousands of tons of cargo each day without capturing a single port. German spies observed strange concrete caissons under construction in British shipyards, but assumed they were part of harbor defenses. No one imagined they were seeing pieces of an artificial port that would make Calais irrelevant. And then there was the weather. On June 4th, German meteorologist Hauptmann Ernst Becker concluded that the raging Channel storm made amphibious landings impossible. He predicted the next feasible window would be June 12th to 15th. His report circulated quickly, offering reassurance to exhausted officers. The enemy would not attack in this weather. They could finally breathe. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commander of Army Group B, took the opportunity to drive home to Germany for his wife Lucie's birthday. Other commanders attended war games in Rennes. General von Schreiber allowed himself a rare moment of calm, staring out at the storm-lashed channel and muttering, "Let them come when the weather clears. We will be ready." But the Allies had one advantage invisible to the Germans. Weather stations in the far North Atlantic, beyond German reach, provided crucial data. Allied forecasters discovered a small, temporary break in the storm. 24 hours of marginally calmer seas and thinning clouds. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. At 9 p.m. on June 5th, as German officers dined or slept, 5,000 Allied ships slipped their moorings. Carriers, destroyers, transports, and landing craft moved silently into the channel. On board, 156,000 men waited in tense silence. Some prayed, some vomited from nerves or seasickness.
Others wrote quick letters home, unaware they would never be posted. Behind them came the airborne troops, paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, British Red Devils of the 6th Airborne, hurtling through darkness toward drop zones behind enemy lines. Their mission: seize bridges, sabotage roads, and confuse defenders. At La Roche-Guyon headquarters, Rommel's chief of staff, General Hans Speidel, reviewed the night reports. All was quiet, weather bad, Calais ready, Normandy uneventful. A peaceful night, he told an aide. He was wrong. At that very moment, 1,200 RAF bombers roared across the channel, their engines shaking the air. The invasion fleet churned through the dark waves. On the decks of landing craft, crews unfolded the canvas screens of the Sherman DD tanks, sealing every joint, praying they would float. Soon, those tanks would drop into the freezing surf and begin to swim toward beaches that German intelligence had deemed impossible targets. The trap was set. The deception was complete. And as the first pale light of June 6th touched the Normandy coast, German sentries looked out over the misty horizon and froze. The sea was filled with ships, hundreds, thousands of them, stretching beyond sight, a metallic armada advancing inexorably toward the shore. Every assumption, every calculation, every proud certainty of the Reich's greatest minds crumbled in that instant. Within hours, chaos reigned from Caen to Cherbourg. Communications collapsed, divisions scrambled, officers shouted contradictory orders, and on those beaches, Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword, men died by the thousands to prove that what had been declared impossible was in fact merely difficult. By nightfall, the impossible had become reality. The Allies had gained a fragile foothold on the continent. The gates of Fortress Europe had been breached. And on a quiet bluff above Calais, General von Schreiber stared once more at the empty horizon and realized that the sentence written in his intelligence report, "An armored assault directly onto fortified beaches remains tactically impossible and strategically suicidal," would go down not as wisdom, but as the epitaph of a military doctrine destroyed by imagination. The dawn of June 6, 1944, would forever remind the world that in war, the deadliest enemy is not superior strength. It is the certainty that you have correctly understood your opponent's mind.
Dawn broke cold and colorless over the English Channel. The sea below the cliffs was a slab of shifting steel, the waves capped in frost-white foam. The wind came hard from the west, carrying the scent of salt, diesel, and distant rain. Standing against it, General Friedrich von Schreiber raised his binoculars, his greatcoat snapping in the gusts. His weathered face, cut deep with lines from years of service, betrayed nothing, but the fatigue behind his eyes was unmistakable. For months now he had watched this same horizon, scanning for the invasion every German soldier knew was coming. The intelligence reports called it Unternehmen Selwa in reverse, an Allied landing somewhere along the northern coast of France. Whether it would be Normandy, Brittany, or here at Pas-de-Calais, no one could say for certain, but Schreiber had been ordered to defend this sector, the narrowest point between England and France, the most logical site for an assault. Behind him stretched miles of fortifications, concrete bunkers, machine gun nests, radar towers, and rows of barbed wire glistening with morning dew. The Atlantic Wall, Hitler's supposed shield against the West, was both impressive and incomplete. His aide-de-camp, Lieutenant Keller, approached cautiously, boots crunching on the gravel. In his gloved hands was a leather-bound folder, stamped Wehrmacht, Oberkommando, Geheim. From Berlin, Herr General, Keller said, saluting crisply. Schreiber took the file, already weary. Another report from the Führerhauptquartier? Yes, sir. The Abwehr summary on Allied movements. It arrived by courier last night. Schreiber flipped through the pages quickly. Aerial reconnaissance photos of English ports, lists of intercepted radio transmissions, names of supposed invasion generals. At the bottom of the final page, typed in red ink, was a single dismissive sentence. No evidence supports an imminent landing in Normandy. Primary threat remains the Pas-de-Calais sector. Schreiber exhaled slowly through his nose. Of course. The words were meant to reassure, but they didn't. They were the same conclusions repeated for months, each time narrowing the scope of Germany's defenses and binding commanders like him to Hitler's delusions. He turned toward the sea again. Do you know what this means, Keller? That we are still the Schwerpunkt, sir. Yes, Schreiber said grimly, and that we will be crushed when the Allies strike elsewhere.
By April 1944, Calais had become a fortress in name only. It bristled with weapons, 88mm guns, flak towers, and mines. But manpower was thin, fuel was rationed, and morale was brittle. The Luftwaffe had withdrawn most of its fighters to defend German cities, leaving the sky largely to the Allies. Schreiber's division, the 84th Infantry, was a mix of veterans from the Eastern Front and raw recruits, barely old enough to shave. The veterans were cynical, the boys terrified. Supplies came irregularly. Every week, the trains from Germany carried fewer crates of ammunition and more orders for strategic conservation. But Calais had one weapon the rest of the coast lacked: the illusion of strength. Allied intelligence, through an elaborate deception called Operation Fortitude, had been feeding Berlin false reports suggesting that General Patton commanded a massive 1st U.S. Army group stationed in Kent, preparing to strike directly across the Channel. Fake radio traffic, inflatable tanks, and dummy airfields, all designed to convince Hitler that Pas-de-Calais was the true invasion site. And it was working. Schreiber's superiors, from Field Marshal Rundstedt to Rommel himself, had urged caution, even flexibility. But Hitler had made up his mind. The invasion would come here, and any deviation from that belief was defeatism. Schreiber, who had survived Stalingrad and the retreat from Kharkiv, recognized the pattern. The Führer's orders were no longer military, they were mystical. That night, after inspecting the coastal batteries, Schreiber returned to his quarters, a stone farmhouse converted into a command post. Maps covered every wall, tracing lines of defense and artillery arcs. On his desk lay a stack of letters from the families of his men, unopened. He poured a measure of schnapps, sat, and stared at the flickering lantern. The wind howled through the shutters. Somewhere beyond the dunes, the surf pounded like artillery. He thought of Russia, of the endless snowfields, the burning tanks, the bodies frozen upright where they fell. He had commanded the 298th Infantry Division at Stalingrad, one of the last to break out before Paulus surrendered. He had seen 1,000 men reduced to ghosts, marching without boots, eating horse meat, killing for a crust of bread. And now, on this gray coast of France, he saw the same machinery of death grinding toward them again, this time from the west. He took another drink. They will come when the fog lifts, he said aloud, as if to the ghosts.
2 days later, a convoy of black staff cars arrived at the Calais headquarters. The driver's flags bore the eagle and oak leaves of a field marshal. Word spread quickly. Rommel himself had come. Rommel, the Desert Fox, was one of the few commanders Schreiber respected. He'd seen action in North Africa and had a reputation for realism, something rare in the Reich's upper ranks. When Rommel entered the command post, the room stiffened. His tan uniform was immaculate, but his face was lined with fatigue. "General von Schreiber," Rommel said, shaking his hand firmly, "your reports have been thorough. I wanted to see your defenses myself." They spent hours touring bunkers and observation posts. Schreiber outlined the minefields, the artillery positions, the supply depots. Rommel listened intently, occasionally jotting notes. At one point, standing on the windswept cliffs, Rommel turned and said quietly, "Do you believe the invasion will come here?" Schreiber hesitated. "If I were the enemy, I would land where the defenses are weakest, Normandy." Rommel nodded slowly. "That's what I think too." "Then why do we concentrate everything here?" Rommel gave a tight, bitter smile. "Because the Führer believes this is the only logical choice, and logic in Berlin has become a dangerous thing." The two men stood in silence, watching the sea. The channel seemed to mock them, its surface calm, concealing the storm beneath. Weeks passed. April turned to May. The air buzzed with Allied bombers by day and distant thunder by night. Every village from Boulogne to Dunkirk trembled under the sound of engines. Reports arrived daily of increased shipping traffic in English ports, of paratrooper drills in southern England, of coded broadcasts from the BBC. Still, Berlin insisted the invasion was weeks away. In the evenings, Schreiber walked alone along the dunes, his boots sinking into damp sand. He would stop to watch the phosphorescent glow of Allied searchlights across the channel. Sometimes he could even see the flicker of distant flares, a faint, mocking light from England. He began writing in his journal, a habit he'd abandoned years before. War has become theater. The actors change, but the stage remains the same. Mud, fear, orders that make no sense. We build walls against the sea, but the tide always returns. On June 5, 1944, the wind shifted. A low front moved in from the Atlantic, bringing sheets of rain and fog so thick it muffled even the sound of the surf. The Luftwaffe patrols reported nothing unusual. The coastal radar stations, blinded by interference, saw only static. That night, Schreiber received a coded message. Unusual naval activity off the Normandy coast, possibly diversionary. He stared at the words for a long moment, then looked to Keller. "Diversionary," he repeated softly, "or the truth." Hours later, the phone rang again. Reports of airborne landings near Caen, explosions, flares, radio chaos. "Normandy," Schreiber whispered. By dawn, confirmation came. The Allied invasion, Operation Overlord, had begun. But Hitler refused to release the panzer divisions near Calais. He was convinced it was a feint, that the real attack would still come at Schreiber's sector. For 72 critical hours, the strongest German forces in France sat idle, waiting for an attack that never came. Schreiber could only watch as history unfolded beyond his reach. By late June, the truth could no longer be denied. Allied forces had broken through at St. Lo and were driving east. Rommel was injured in an air attack. Rundstedt was dismissed. The once proud Atlantic Wall had been breached. At Calais, Schreiber's men waited for orders that never came. Supply lines collapsed. Deserters slipped away at night. Allied bombers roamed freely, turning bunkers into tombs.
On July 10th, Schreiber ordered the evacuation of his sector, an act that officially he was never permitted to give. He sent his staff south under cover of darkness and destroyed the last remaining artillery pieces. As he watched the flames rise over the channel, Curler asked softly, "Was it worth it, sir?" Schreiber shook his head. "We built fortresses to defend an idea already dead. The enemy was never the Allies. It was our own blindness."
Years later, long after the war, historians would debate the meaning of Pas-de-Calais, the fortress that never fought, the defenders who waited for an invasion that never came. But for those like Friedrich von Schreiber, it became a symbol of something deeper, the futility of obedience without vision, of courage wasted on illusions. In his memoirs, written in exile, he recalled that morning in April 1944. The horizon was empty, yet full of ghosts. We were defending not a coastline, but a lie. The enemy we feared was already inside us. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.